Imagine this, you're living in a city that was supposed to be erased from history, but by a twist of fate, another city vanishes instead. Why did Nagasaki, not Kokura, become the target of the world's second atomic bomb? Was it a simple mistake, a weather issue, or something far more deliberate? Today, we're uncovering the hidden truth behind one of history's most chilling what-ifs, August 9, 1945, a date forever etched in human memory. As the world stood on the brink of the end of World War II, the United States prepared to drop its second atomic bomb, this time on Japan's industrial heartland. But here's the twist. Nagasaki wasn't supposed to be the target. The bomber plane, Bockscar, carrying a deadly weapon nicknamed Fat Man, was assigned to strike a city called Kokura. Yet just hours later, the bomb detonated over Nagasaki. Did you know that Nagasaki was never supposed to be bombed? In fact, the city that was marked for total destruction wasn't Nagasaki at all. It was a quiet industrial city called Kokura. Yes, the same Kokura that almost vanished from the map, but survived by what many call a miracle of fate. Let's rewind to August 1945. The United States had already dropped the first atomic bomb on Hiroshima just 3 days earlier on August 6th. The devastation was beyond comprehension. Yet, in the midst of that horror, the U.S. military was preparing for a second strike. This time, the mission was led by a B-29 bomber named Bockscar, carrying a plutonium bomb called Fat Man. The target list was carefully chosen, and Kokura was right at the top. Why? Because Kokura was more than just another Japanese city. It was an industrial hub, home to one of Japan's largest arsenals and weapon manufacturing plants, the Kokura Arsenal, which produced rifles, ammunition, and war machinery for the Imperial Army. Destroying Kokura would cripple Japan's military supply chain and send a powerful message: surrender or face complete annihilation. But there's another layer to Kokura's significance: symbolism. The city had been untouched by major air raids, making it a fresh target that would allow scientists and military planners to measure the full impact of the atomic bomb. This wasn't just about ending the war. It was also, in part, a cold scientific experiment to observe how much destruction a single bomb could unleash on an intact city. The idea was chilling: drop the bomb on a clean canvas and study the results. Now imagine this. Early morning, August 9th, 1945, the Bockscar takes off from Tinian Island, a tiny U.S. base in the Pacific, carrying a weapon that could end tens of thousands of lives. The crew's orders are clear. Kokura is the primary target. Nagasaki at this point is merely a backup option, a name on a list, nothing more. The flight to Kokura is tense. The crew knows what they're carrying, and they know what it means. When they finally reach the skies above Kokura around 10 a.m., something unexpected happens. A thick haze and smoke blanket the city. The weather reports had suggested clear skies, but on that morning, the city below is covered by a mix of fog, clouds, and smoke from nearby bombings the previous night. The pilots can't get a clear visual of the target. According to strict military protocol, the bomb must be dropped visually, not by radar. The pilots circle once, twice, 3 times, desperately trying to find a clear view of the target. Each minute that passes burns more precious fuel, and with every failed attempt, tension inside the aircraft rises. Down below, the people of Kokura have no idea how close they are to complete destruction. The minutes tick by. The bomber crew makes another pass over the city, still no luck. The visibility is too poor. Some say that the smoke was from nearby Yahata, a neighboring city that had been heavily bombed the day before. Others believe it was intentional, a last act of defiance by Japanese forces, who might have set fires to create a smokescreen to protect Kokura. No one knows for sure. But what we do know is this: fate, weather, and a few crucial decisions in the air would change history in ways no one could have predicted. The bomber's commander, Major Charles Sweeney, is faced with an impossible choice. He's running low on fuel, the city is still obscured, and returning to base is becoming dangerously risky. The crew argues, time runs out, and with one final decision, they turn toward their secondary target, Nagasaki. Kokura's citizens would never know how close they came to annihilation that day. The city would survive the war, earning a haunting nickname in post-war Japan, the Lucky City. But for Nagasaki, that twist of fate would mean something very different. The morning of August 9, 1945 began like any other for the crew of the B-29 bomber named Bockscar, but what they carried inside that aircraft was unlike anything the world had ever known. Nestled in its bomb bay was the second atomic bomb ever built for combat, a plutonium weapon nicknamed Fat Man, its mission to strike Kokura, Japan. What the crew didn't know was that this flight would turn into one of the most chaotic, nerve-wracking missions in history, filled with technical malfunctions, confusion, and life-or-death decisions that would ultimately change the target and the course of history. From the very start, the mission was troubled. As the sun rose over Tinian Island in the Pacific, the crew prepared for takeoff, but even before they left the ground, they ran into a major problem. One of the fuel pumps in the reserve tank wasn't working. That meant they were carrying a massive amount of unusable fuel, extra weight that would slow them down and limit their flight range. Still, with a tight schedule and orders from high command, the mission couldn't be delayed. So, despite the malfunction, Major Charles Sweeney, the pilot, made the decision to proceed. They took off at 3:47 a.m., heading toward Japan. The tension in the air was almost unbearable. Inside the aircraft, 11 men sat in silence, fully aware of the destructive power hanging beneath them. Fat Man wasn't just another bomb. It was far more complex than the one dropped on Hiroshima and far riskier to handle. If something went wrong mid-flight, the results could be catastrophic. Every jolt of turbulence, every flicker on the instrument panel carried a weight of dread. Their first stop was Iwo Jima, where they were supposed to rendezvous with 2 other B-29s, one for observation and one for photography. But again, things didn't go as planned. The weather conditions and timing issues caused delays, forcing the Bockscar to circle for nearly 40 minutes, burning through even more precious fuel. Time was slipping away, and Sweeney knew they were already behind schedule. Finally, they formed up and turned toward the target, Kokura. The crew braced themselves as the city came into range around 10 a.m., but what they saw below was not what they expected. Kokura was hidden under a thick veil of smoke, haze, and cloud cover. They could barely make out the outlines of the city. According to their orders, they needed a clear visual target before dropping the bomb. Blind bombing was not permitted, the mission had to be precise, so they began circling Kokura. 1 pass, 2 passes, 3 passes. Each time, the smoke refused to clear. The crew grew restless. The plane's engines roared as they looped around the city again and again, trying to catch even a glimpse of the arsenal below. But with every minute that passed, they were burning more fuel, and the risk of enemy anti-aircraft fire increased. Below them, people could hear the faint drone of bombers overhead, but they had no idea how close their city was to total destruction. Major Sweeney and his co-pilot, Captain Behan, debated furiously. Should they drop the bomb through the clouds and risk missing the target completely? Or should they abort and try again another day? The pressure from above and the orders from high command weighed heavily on them. But the mechanical issues and dwindling fuel made one thing clear. They were running out of time. The cockpit was filled with tension. The crew could feel the heat, the fatigue, and the heavy silence as they circled one last time. Still no clear sight. Sweeney knew that continuing would mean risking a crash into the sea before they could even return to base. He looked at the fuel gauges, then at the map. There was only one other option left, the secondary target, Nagasaki. The decision was made in a matter of seconds. No dramatic speech, no debate. Just a firm turn of the aircraft, a new heading, and a chilling thought shared by every man aboard. They were about to unleash unimaginable destruction. Just not on the city they were sent to destroy. The engines roared as Bockscar veered south toward Nagasaki, carrying its deadly cargo and an entire world's fate balanced on the edge of a desperate, fuel-starved mission. As the B-29 Bockscar left Kokura's airspace behind, the crew sat in uneasy silence. The city that was meant to be erased from existence had just been spared, but not because of mercy, diplomacy, or surrender. It was spared by a mixture of weather, bad luck, and desperate timing. The mission that had started with precision and planning was now unraveling in mid-air. Major Charles Sweeney, The man in command faced a decision no pilot should ever have to make. Continue flying with dangerously low fuel or abort the mission and risk losing the bomb, the aircraft, and his entire crew. Inside the aircraft, the tension was palpable. The fuel situation had become critical. The earlier malfunction with the fuel pump meant that much of their reserve fuel was trapped, unreachable. The Bockscar had already spent nearly 45 minutes circling Kokura, trying to get a clear visual on the target. Each pass had drained their remaining fuel and raised the stakes higher. Sweeney knew they didn't have enough to make it back to Tinian. Even Iwo Jima, their emergency landing site, was now questionable. They needed to drop the bomb soon, or they'd be forced to ditch it into the sea. But there was a problem. This wasn't a conventional bomb. It wasn't something you could simply drop anywhere and hope for the best. Every man on board understood the gravity of the situation. The Fat Man bomb wasn't fully armed yet, but the process was delicate. If the aircraft went down, or they attempted an emergency landing with the bomb on board, the consequences could be catastrophic. They couldn't return home with it, and they couldn't risk it detonating accidentally. Sweeney had to make a call, and fast. He looked toward his bombardier, Captain Kermit Behan, who was responsible for identifying and aiming at the target. Behan's job was to visually lock onto the target before releasing the bomb. But Kokura was gone from their options now, swallowed by the thick smoke that refused to clear. The only remaining name on the mission plan was Nagasaki, the secondary target, a port city surrounded by mountains, known for its shipyards and war industries. It wasn't an ideal target. The city's geography made accurate bombing difficult, and visibility reports weren't much better there. But there was no other choice left. Sweeney made the decision. He ordered the crew to change course and head for Nagasaki. The atmosphere inside the bomber shifted instantly. They knew this meant gambling with their lives. The fuel levels were so low that even reaching the new target would be risky, and returning afterwards seemed almost impossible. But orders were orders, and the world below had no idea what was now heading its way. As the bomber turned south, the crew worked quickly to prepare the bomb for release. Lieutenant Frederick Ashworth, the mission's weaponeer, began arming Fat Man in the cramped, tense space of the aircraft. Every movement was careful, deliberate. One wrong switch, one slip of the hand, and the bomb could detonate midair. Outside, the sky was calm, but inside that metal fuselage, it felt like every heartbeat echoed through the walls. When they finally approached Nagasaki, it wasn't the clear target zone they'd hoped for. The city was also partly covered by clouds and haze. The crew couldn't see their aiming point, the Mitsubishi Arms Works, clearly. They had already made multiple failed passes over Kokura. Another delay here could mean running out of fuel completely. The pressure was unbearable. Behan strained through his bomb sight, scanning for a break in the clouds. Just when it seemed like the mission might end in failure, a small gap opened, a brief, fleeting window through the clouds. Behan didn't hesitate. He locked onto the target and gave the signal. Sweeney nodded, the bomb bay doors opened, and Fat Man fell away into the mist below. The men aboard Bockscar held their breath as they banked sharply to escape the blast radius. 43 seconds later, a blinding flash filled the sky. The bomb exploded 1,650 feet above Nagasaki, releasing a force equivalent to 21,000 tons of TNT. At that moment, none of them spoke. They could see the massive mushroom cloud rising beneath them, a column of fire and ash that reached miles into the sky. They didn't know how many lives had been lost, how many buildings destroyed, or how this moment would echo through history. All they knew was that Kokura was spared and Nagasaki had taken its place. As the Bockscar turned away, running on fumes, the men inside understood that a few degrees of course correction, a patch of cloud or a malfunctioning fuel pump had decided the fate of 2 entire cities on the surface. The story of why Nagasaki was bombed instead of Kokura seems like a simple twist of fate, weather, smoke, and bad timing. But as historians began to dig deeper into the records, mission notes, and declassified documents, they discovered that there may have been more to this decision than chance. Behind the cloud cover and desperate choices of the Bockscar crew lay a web of strategy, politics, and even moral debate that shaped which city would become the world's second atomic target. When the Target Committee of the United States first met in the spring of 1945, their objective wasn't just to end the war. They were also thinking about sending a message not only to Japan but to the rest of the world, particularly the Soviet Union. The war in Europe had just ended, and tensions between the US and the Soviets were already rising. The atomic bomb was not only a weapon of destruction. It was a symbol of dominance, a statement that America now possessed a power beyond imagination. So, when the target cities were selected, they weren't chosen randomly. Each city had to fulfill a set of criteria. It had to have military value. It had to be largely untouched by previous bombings, and it needed to demonstrate the bomb's overwhelming power. Kokura fit perfectly into that plan. Its vast arsenal complex made it an ideal military target. But Nagasaki wasn't far behind. It was home to the Mitsubishi Steel and Arms Works and the Mitsubishi Shipyard, where Japanese warships, torpedoes, and munitions were produced. Strategically, destroying Nagasaki would cripple Japan's ability to sustain naval warfare. But there was a deeper, more subtle reason why Nagasaki was even on the list. Some historians believe that the choice of targets had a psychological component, a desire to demonstrate the bomb's unpredictability, to show that any city, no matter how geographically challenging or historically significant, could be obliterated in an instant. There's also the question of timing. The US wanted to force Japan's surrender as quickly as possible before the Soviets could declare war on Japan and claim influence over Asia. Stalin had promised to enter the Pacific conflict 3 months after Germany's defeat, and that deadline was rapidly approaching in early August 1945. The Americans knew that if the Soviet Union joined the war, it could change the balance of power in the region. Dropping the second bomb quickly and successfully would demonstrate U.S. superiority and eliminate the need for Soviet involvement in Japan's surrender negotiations. But there's something even more haunting behind the scenes: the scientific agenda. After the first bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, scientists and military planners wanted to observe the effects of a different type of bomb. Little Boy, the weapon used on Hiroshima, was a uranium bomb. Fat Man, the one carried by Bockscar, was a plutonium bomb, more complex, more powerful, and still untested on a real city. Some of the Manhattan Project scientists viewed Nagasaki as part of an experiment, a grim opportunity to compare data and understand the weapon's effectiveness. The choice wasn't purely strategic, it was also experimental. There is another layer to the mystery that historians still debate: why the mission wasn't delayed. Sweeney and his crew were aware of the poor weather reports over Kokura, and even after the failed attempts to locate the target, command didn't order them to return or postpone. Instead, they pressed on toward Nagasaki, knowing visibility there might be just as bad. Some suggest there was intense pressure from top commanders to drop the bomb that day no matter what, because the military wanted to use both atomic weapons before Japan had a chance to surrender or the Soviet Union could interfere. In other words, the urgency wasn't just about ending the war. It was about making sure both types of atomic bombs were tested and showcased to the world. So while the official explanation has always been that weather forced the mission to divert, the truth may not be so simple. Behind every technical malfunction and cloud-covered sky lay hidden motives shaped by politics, science, power, and a world already preparing for the next conflict even before the current one had ended. When the bomb detonated over Nagasaki at 11:02 a.m. on August 9, 1945, the world below was transformed in a single flash. The city that had been a secondary target just hours earlier was now the epicenter of unimaginable destruction. The explosion instantly flattened everything within a 2-kilometer radius of factories. Homes, hospitals, schools, all gone in seconds. The force was so immense that it carved deep scars into the surrounding mountains, turning Nagasaki's lush valleys into a wasteland of fire and ash. Tens of thousands of lives vanished in the blink of an eye, and thousands more would die in the following days from radiation and burns. What makes this moment even more haunting is the contrast between the fate of Nagasaki and Kokura. One city burned under the world's most powerful weapon. The other continued with its morning routine, unaware of how close it came to annihilation. While Nagasaki was consumed by flames, Kokura's people went about their day, the hum of factories, the chatter of families, the rhythm of ordinary life uninterrupted. The distance between life and death that morning was decided by a veil of smoke and a few fateful decisions made thousands of feet above. In the days that followed, Nagasaki became a symbol of both tragedy and endurance. The city's landscape was unrecognizable. The famous Urakami Cathedral, once one of the largest churches in East Asia, was reduced to rubble. The Mitsubishi shipyards, a key military target, were completely obliterated. Hospitals were overflowing with the wounded, many of whom didn't even realize they had been exposed to lethal doses of radiation. Survivors described the scene as a city of ghosts, people wandering in silence, their clothes burned off, their skins scorched, clutching children who no longer moved. Meanwhile, Kokura, just 150 kilometers away, earned a new identity, the Lucky City. The phrase spread quickly, almost whispered with disbelief. Residents only later discovered that they had been the original target, that the same B-29 bomber had circled above them again and again, unable to drop its deadly cargo because the city was hidden by clouds and smoke. The people of Kokura survived not because of strategy, not because of any defense system, but because of weather, an invisible shield of nature that saved tens of thousands of lives. For years after the war, this eerie contrast haunted both cities. Survivors from Nagasaki would visit Kokura, sometimes in quiet disbelief, knowing that fate could easily have been reversed. Some even called it the mercy of smoke. Historians later learned that the smoke over Kokura came from nearby Yahata, where an air raid had set fires the night before. In other words, the destruction of one city accidentally protected another. It was a cruel twist. One city's suffering became another's salvation. But the aftermath wasn't just physical, it was deeply psychological. Nagasaki's survivors, known as hibakusha, faced lifelong challenges. Many suffered from severe radiation sickness, disfigurement, and chronic illness. They lived with the trauma of having seen their families, friends, and entire neighborhoods erased in a single moment. The emotional scars were as deep as the physical ones. Yet, amid the despair, there was also resilience. Nagasaki would rebuild from the ashes, becoming a global symbol of peace and nuclear disarmament. Kokura, on the other hand, carried its own invisible burden. The residents knew they had escaped death by pure coincidence, and with that came what some called survivor's guilt. How do you live with the knowledge that your city was supposed to be destroyed, that the suffering meant for you fell upon others? For decades, the people of Kokura avoided speaking about it openly. It was as if their survival came with a silent responsibility, a haunting reminder of how fragile fate could be. In the years that followed, as both cities evolved, their intertwined destinies remained one of history's most profound contrasts. Nagasaki's ashes became the foundation for a movement against nuclear war, while Kokura lived on as a quiet reminder of how close humanity once came to repeating the same devastation twice in 3 days. In the wake of Nagasaki's destruction, the world stood still, shocked, horrified, and uncertain of what humanity had just unleashed upon itself. The mushroom cloud that rose above Nagasaki wasn't just the mark of victory or the end of a brutal war. It was a symbol of a new and terrifying age. For the first time, mankind had created a weapon so powerful that it could erase entire cities in seconds, leaving behind shadows of people on walls and silence where life once thrived. But beyond the devastation, the bombing of Nagasaki raised questions that still echo through history. Why was the second bomb necessary? Was it truly to force Japan's surrender, or was it to demonstrate power to show the world, and especially the Soviet Union, what the United States was capable of? In the immediate aftermath, the official justification was clear. The U.S. government claimed that the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki saved lives by ending the war more quickly. They argued that without the bombs, Japan would have resisted until the bitter end, costing millions of additional deaths in a land invasion. But over time, historians began to question this narrative. By early August 1945, Japan's military position was already collapsing. Cities were in ruins, supply chains were broken, and the Soviet Union had just entered the war against Japan, a development that made surrender almost inevitable. Many now believe that the second bomb, dropped only 3 days after Hiroshima, was less about military necessity and more about sending a message to the Soviets at the dawn of the Cold War. The moral debate surrounding Nagasaki is perhaps one of the most complex in human history. Inside the United States, many of those who worked on the Manhattan Project struggled to come to terms with what they had created. Scientists like Leo Szilard and Joseph Rotblat had warned against using the bomb on civilian populations, arguing for a demonstration on an uninhabited island to force surrender without mass casualties. Their pleas were ignored. Others, like General Leslie Groves and Secretary of War Henry Stimson, believed the bombs were essential to ending the conflict swiftly. In their eyes, every day the war continued meant thousands more lives lost. Yet the photographs that emerged from Nagasaki children burned beyond recognition. Hospitals overflowing with the dying, entire neighborhoods vaporized, told a story that no military justification could ever erase. For Japan, Nagasaki became a wound that would never truly heal. Survivors carried not only the physical scars, but the emotional and moral burden of what had happened. The city's leaders vowed that Nagasaki would never again be associated solely with destruction, but with peace and forgiveness. Over time, Nagasaki rebuilt itself into a city dedicated to remembrance. Every year, on August 9th, thousands gather at the Nagasaki Peace Park, standing in silence as the clock strikes 11:02 a.m., the exact moment the bomb detonated. The ceremony isn't just about mourning. It's a reminder of what happens when humanity loses its sense of compassion and control. Meanwhile, Kokura's story faded into the background. The lucky city escaped devastation, but its luck came with reflection. The residents of Kokura, spared by chance, understood more than anyone how fragile life could be. Some survivors from Nagasaki even visited Kokura, seeking answers to the unanswerable why one city was destroyed while another survived. There were no explanations, only silence and a shared grief that connected the two cities forever. In the broader arc of history, Nagasaki's bombing marked the beginning of the nuclear era, an age defined by both fear and deterrence. The power that leveled a city in 1945 soon became the foundation for global politics, shaping decades of tension between superpowers. Nations raced to build their own atomic weapons, each one claiming it was for defense. Even as the world teetered on the edge of annihilation, what happened over Nagasaki became the ultimate warning that technology without morality leads only to devastation. And so the legacy of Nagasaki is not just a story about war, it is a story about choice. The choice of leaders, of scientists, of soldiers, and of fate itself. A reminder that every decision, every order, every turn of an aircraft in the sky can shape the destiny of millions. The bombing of Nagasaki forced humanity to confront the terrifying truth of its own power. And even today, decades later, we are still asking the same haunting question. When does victory cross the line into tragedy as we look back on the mystery of Nagasaki's bombing? One truth becomes painfully clear. History often turns on the smallest of moments. A patch of cloud, a malfunctioning fuel pump, a few minutes of hesitation in the sky. These fleeting details determined which city would live and which would be forever marked by fire. Kokura's survival and Nagasaki's destruction were not part of a grand design, but a sequence of human decisions and uncontrollable circumstances that converged in one irreversible moment. The mission of Bockscar began as a calculated military operation, yet it ended as one of the most haunting moral puzzles in human history. Was Nagasaki truly chosen by accident, or was it the inevitable outcome of a world racing to prove its power? The answer lies somewhere between strategy and chance, between human ambition and human error. In the aftermath, both cities carried their own kind of legacy. Nagasaki rose from the ashes, not as a symbol of destruction, but as a beacon of peace, a city that turned its greatest tragedy into a plea for a world without nuclear war. Kokura, spared by fate, lived with the quiet knowledge that its survival came at another's cost, forever tied to a decision made in the clouds. The story of these two cities is more than just a historical account. It is a reflection of the choices we make and the consequences they carry. It reminds us that behind every headline, every act of war, and every so-called strategic decision, there are lives, families, and futures hanging in the balance. In the end, the mystery of Nagasaki's target, ISNT, just about why it was chosen over Kokura. It asks about how fragile the line between survival and devastation can be. And as long as the world remembers that morning of August 9th, 1945, the question will always echo through time. Was it destiny or was it a warning from history itself?